lot more counterpoint than the violin could offer. The same thing in one of the cello suites, I forget which one exactly, but it's so great. Open your minds to the idea that Bach already wrote the music that you need and you don't have to change it. It's already there. It's waiting for you and it's right. You just have to go out there, take the music, put it on the stand, and figure out how you're going to play it. If you're going to come after the Baroque period, right, getting into the early classical, then things start to get a little bit dangerous, because then we have the advancement of virtuosity for its own sake. Okay? You have the classical period, I say Haydn doesn't really work. I'm sorry, I don't know why. I can't find anything from Haydn that really works on this instrument. I mean, you can play some of the Handel stuff, the violin stuff. I find that it's too weak. You know, particularly the violin sonatas, because then you need to play it, really, you need to play it with a pianist. And if I'm going to be a soloist, I don't want to have a pianist to play something like that. Mozart is wonderful, because, actually, it sounds a little strange, it's famous, it's accessible, and you have to play the right notes. You can't blow it with Mozart. You can blow it with some other composer somewhat, but Mozart's a bit of a problem. If you're going to take little pieces that don't need much changing, for instance, the Sonata in A major, Kirchhoff-Verzeichnis 311. Now there was a big variation group that comes after that. I wouldn't suggest the variation so you're really serious. As I pointed out last night, the final movement of the same song. Now there we start to get into problems. There's a middle section there you just cannot play with the left hand accompaniment. So what I do is I just leave the left hand out and I play. That's play it up an octave the second time. It makes it a little bit more interesting because it's a whatever it is. You don't really need that bass note, bass line. When you start to get out of that classical period, when you start getting out of, let's say, 1800, then you start to get into things that are more specifically piano, right? Mozart and Beethoven wrote pieces that could be played either on the harpsichord or the piano. There was no big difference. But then the piano technology started to advance, and you got pieces that were specifically pianistic. That's where you get more problems if you want to play the serious music. As I mentioned before, you can start to play still some of the early Beethoven. In the second movement. Doesn't really need to be changed up. There is a little bit in the second section of this Beethoven where technically he's going, what is it? Which is really hard to do with one. I can't do it, so that's much easier to. You can change an arpeggiation like that. That's not really a problem because the melody is what you want to focus on. Yeah. Remember too, this is an important thing, that when you play this instrument, you have only one thing, but I mean, not only one thing, but you have one major unnatural characteristic, and that is because the notes of the bass are longer and louder than the notes of the right hand, when you play any piece where you need to balance the voices, you have to be very careful that the left hand doesn't dominate, because if you have, does anybody know what a Gagic accent is? Who can tell me what an Gagic accent is? Okay, listen carefully, you'll hear where the Gagic accent is. Okay, that means when something's longer, the ear is going to pay more attention to it. when you start to pulse something, if it's longer, then that becomes the accent. It would be very hard to hear that as 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, right? That leads into the 1, the longer note. That means, because that actually creates more problems in having a clear texture. You follow what I mean? When you play the dubs, even if it's written, even if Bach did something in octaves, which is very rare, whenever Bach is transcribed, the bass automatically comes in octaves. Look at the list transcriptions. Gosh, you think it's like all there is bass. But we don't have that problem, okay? We can play that with just removing that bass. For instance, something like this in Beethoven, where he really wants to get a super dark sound, right? The Moonlight Sonata. Lots of places where he's going to go way down deeper than our register. You might think, nope, I can't play that piece because Beethoven requires notes I don't have. It's not about the notes, it's about the music. And if you understand that very often a bass line is doubled in octaves because it needs a little bit of, enthusiasm there. We don't have that problem. Let the bass speak for itself, thank you very much, and more emphasize the right hand. Yeah, that's something that becomes a weakness with a lot of people. I'm talking about the piano repertoire. If we come up later, right, the middle of the 19th century, forget it. It's just too hard, okay? There are little pieces that you can do. A little bit of Chopin, or, whatever. Little pieces are okay. That's from the preludes. When you start to get into like the major stuff, like Beethoven's final period, Opus 90, I mean, technically it's possible, but you're going to be an old person before you really get to it. So, leave that stuff out. When you come into the 20th century, it gets easier again. The thing is that it's not that much fun to play. If you're talking about the Schoenberg little pieces or any of the existentialist composers, it might be interesting to play, or the expressionists, sorry. But then the texture starts to get clear too. If you get out of the mainstream, particularly Satie. I mean, he's really outside the mainstream. You want to get something like beautiful, simple. It's a simplicity of texture that works very well with this instrument. Also, all of the Gnossienne. Most people know about the Gymnopédie, but the Gnossienne. Beautiful music. It gives you a lot of options tonally. In other words, you could play it at pitch, you can still play it an octave higher. Another great group of pieces to play are all of the early guitar pieces by Villa-Lobos. If you want to talk about the choros or the preludes, it's just tremendous material, Yes?
Do you ever get as far as Piazzolla? Because we do quite a bit of those transcriptions. One of the main things that comes up with people doing guitar transcriptions, we always debate how they might replicate A, the harmonics, and B, be the percussive effects on the body.